They mocked her at every family dinner. They called her a burden, a nobody, and a mistake their son should never have married. Then one day, they pushed her out and brought another woman into his life. They thought they had won. But what none of them knew was that the quiet first wife they humiliated owned the company, the mansion, and nearly everything they were living off. The day the truth came out, their entire world collapsed. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Claire Bennett, and this story started a few years ago when I married Ethan Carter. Ethan was a successful businessman from Texas. He was smart, hardworking, and respected by many people. When we met, he treated me with kindness and respect. I fell in love with him because of the way he listened to me and made me feel valued. After dating for 2 years, we got married. There was something Ethan never fully understood about me. My family had a lot of money. My grandfather had built a successful business, and our family lived comfortably for generations. But I never liked talking about wealth. I wanted people to know me for who I was, not for what I owned. Because of that, I kept my background private. At first, I thought Ethan's family would accept me. I tried my best to be a good daughter-in-law. I attended family gatherings, helped during holidays, and always treated everyone with respect. But Ethan's mother, Margaret Carter, never liked me. From the moment we met, I could feel her disapproval. She believed Ethan deserved someone different. No matter what I did, it was never enough for her. If I stayed quiet, she called me boring. If I joined conversations, she said I talked too much. If I helped in the kitchen, she found something wrong with the way I did it. Soon, other family members started treating me the same way. Family dinners became difficult. Someone always had a comment about my clothes, my job, or my personality. They laughed at me when they thought I wouldn't notice. Sometimes they made jokes directly in front of me. What hurt the most was that I kept trying. I bought thoughtful gifts for birthdays. I remembered important dates. I helped whenever someone needed support. I wanted to be accepted because these were the people Ethan loved. But no matter how hard I tried, their attitude never changed. Many nights I went home feeling exhausted and heartbroken. Still, I stayed silent. I told myself things would get better with time. I loved Ethan, and because I loved him, I endured far more than I should have. As time passed, things became even harder for me. Margaret stopped treating me like a member of the family. Important family plans were made without telling me. Sometimes I would learn about gatherings only after they had already happened. Other times, everyone would be discussing something that had been decided days earlier, and I would sit there confused because nobody had informed me. When I asked questions, Margaret would simply say it was a family matter. Hearing those words hurt every time because I was Ethan's wife. I was supposed to be family too. Ethan's younger sister, Vanessa Carter, became even more difficult to deal with. Unlike Margaret, who often hid her dislike behind polite words, Vanessa didn't care about being subtle. She openly mocked me whenever she had the chance. She often made comments about my background. Since I never talked much about my family, Vanessa assumed I came from an ordinary life and used that against me. She would compare me to women she considered more successful or more suitable for Ethan. Sometimes she made jokes that caused everyone else at the table to laugh while I sat there trying to pretend I wasn't hurt. The holidays became the worst part of the year. Most people look forward to Thanksgiving, Christmas, and family celebrations. I started dreading them. Every gathering felt like a test I could never pass. No matter what I wore, what gift I brought, or how much effort I made, someone found a reason to criticize me. The stress followed me home after every event. I would spend hours replaying conversations in my head, wondering what I had done wrong. Ethan saw the tension. I know he noticed the uncomfortable moments. He saw the looks people gave me and heard some of the comments. But whenever I tried to talk about it, he would tell me to ignore it. He said his family had strong personalities and that arguing would only make things worse. His refusal to step in hurt more than the insults themselves. Slowly, I began feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. I stopped sharing my feelings because I didn't think anyone wanted to hear them. I became quieter and less confident. The woman I used to be was disappearing little by little. What I didn't know at the time was that Margaret had already started making plans. She was convinced that Ethan deserved someone else. While pretending everything was normal, she quietly looked for a woman she believed would be a better match for her son. Meanwhile, I continued trying to hold everything together, unaware that the people around me were already working to push me out of the family completely. A few months later, I started noticing a new name coming up in conversations. That name was Sophia Reynolds. Margaret first mentioned her during a family dinner. She talked about Sophia as if she were the most impressive woman she had ever met. According to Margaret, Sophia was intelligent, elegant, successful, and came from a respected family. At first, I did not think much about it. People talk about their friends all the time. I assumed Sophia was simply the daughter of someone Margaret knew. Then Sophia started appearing everywhere. One weekend, Margaret invited her to a family barbecue. The following week, she was present at a birthday celebration. Soon after that, she joined another family gathering. The strange part was that nobody seemed to think it was unusual. Sophia quickly became comfortable around Ethan's family. She smiled constantly, complimented everyone, and always knew exactly what to say. Margaret loved having her around. Vanessa treated Sophia like a close friend almost immediately. In public, Sophia appeared kind and respectful. Anyone meeting her for the first time would probably think she was wonderful. But whenever we were alone, I saw a different side of her. She made comments that sounded innocent at first but carried hidden meaning. She often questioned whether I truly understood Ethan's lifestyle or his ambitions. Sometimes she would look around the room and casually mention how important it was for successful men to have wives who could help advance their careers. Then she would smile as if she had said nothing wrong. The more time passed, the more obvious things became. Margaret constantly compared us. If Sophia cooked something, Margaret praised it for days. If Sophia shared an opinion, Margaret called her thoughtful and mature. Then she would look at me and point out something I lacked. It felt less like a comparison and more like a competition that I had never agreed to enter. Soon, invitations started changing. There were family lunches I was not told about. There were gatherings where Sophia attended while I stayed home, unaware they were even happening. When I found out later, everyone acted as though it was completely normal. The situation became impossible to ignore. Even Ethan seemed uncomfortable whenever Sophia was around. I could see it in the way he avoided certain conversations. But once again, he refused to address what was happening. He never asked why Sophia was suddenly included in every family event. He never questioned why I was being left out. His silence gave everyone permission to continue. One evening, after another gathering where Sophia had been treated like a member of the family, the truth finally became clear to me. This was not an accident. This was not my imagination. Someone was trying to take my place. And the most painful part was realizing that nobody around me seemed willing to stop it. After realizing what was happening, I knew I could not stay silent any longer. For months, I had tried to be patient. I had ignored hurtful comments, accepted unfair treatment, and convinced myself that things would eventually improve. But now the situation had gone too far. One evening, after Ethan returned home from work, I asked him to sit down and talk. I told him everything I had been feeling. I explained how painful it was to watch his family treat Sophia like she belonged in my place. I told him how excluded I felt and how his mother's behavior was damaging our marriage. For the first time, I stopped holding back. I asked him a simple question. Do you see what's happening? Ethan stayed quiet for a moment before answering. He admitted that things had become uncomfortable. Hearing that should have made me feel better, but it didn't. If he could see the problem, why wasn't he doing anything about it? I asked him to stand up for us. I wasn't asking him to fight with his family. I wasn't asking him to choose between me and them. I only wanted him to make it clear that our marriage deserved respect. Instead, Ethan told me he wanted peace. He said confronting his mother would only create more problems. He said arguments would make family gatherings even worse. The more he talked, the more I realized what he was really saying. He was choosing to avoid conflict instead of protecting our relationship. That conversation broke something inside me. I had spent years supporting Ethan through difficult moments. Whenever he faced challenges, I stood beside him without hesitation. Now, when I needed him most, he was stepping back. I felt completely alone. Over the following weeks, Sophia became even closer to the Carter family. Margaret proudly included her in conversations about future plans and family events. Sometimes it felt like she wanted everyone to see how much she favored Sophia. Then Margaret stopped hiding her intentions. One afternoon during a family gathering, she openly suggested that some marriages simply don't work out. As she spoke, she looked directly at Ethan. A few moments later, she started talking about how important it was for people to find partners who truly fit into their lives. Nobody questioned what she meant. The message was obvious. She wanted Ethan to leave me. What hurt the most was watching Ethan remain silent again. He never challenged her words. He never defended our marriage. As I drove home that night, I found myself thinking about everything I had given up over the years. The effort, the patience, the sacrifices. I had invested so much into this relationship because I believed it was worth fighting for. For the first time, I began wondering if I was the only person still fighting for it. A few weeks later, Margaret organized a large family celebration at a country club outside the city. Many relatives attended. There were long tables, decorations, music, and plenty of food. From the outside, it looked like a happy family gathering. I almost didn't go. Something inside me felt uneasy, but I decided to attend because I still hoped things could improve. When Ethan and I arrived, I immediately noticed that Sophia was already there. She was standing near Margaret and talking comfortably with several relatives. No one seemed surprised to see her. In fact, she appeared more welcome than I did. As the evening continued, I tried to stay polite and avoid conflict. Then came the moment that changed everything. During dinner, Margaret stood up to give a speech. At first, she thanked everyone for coming. People listened and smiled as she talked about family, success, and the future. Then her attention shifted. She started speaking about the importance of choosing the right partner in life. The room became quieter. I felt nervous as she continued. Without saying my name directly at first, she began describing qualities she believed a wife should have. Then she started praising Sophia in front of everyone. She called her intelligent, elegant, and perfect for a successful man. Several people nodded in agreement. Then Margaret smiled and finally said what she had been wanting to say for months. She announced that Sophia would have made a much better wife for Ethan. For a moment, the room was silent. Then a few relatives laughed. Others agreed openly. Some even made comments about how different things could have been. I sat frozen in my chair. I couldn't believe this was happening in front of so many people. The humiliation was overwhelming. My eyes immediately moved toward Ethan. I waited for him to say something. Anything. A simple sentence would have been enough. But he remained silent. He looked uncomfortable, but he said nothing. No defense. No objection. Nothing. At that moment, I understood exactly where I stood. I quietly got up from my seat. Nobody tried to stop me. Nobody apologized. I walked out of the building and made it to my car before the tears finally came. I sat there for a long time, crying harder than I had in years. Later that night, Ethan came home. The atmosphere between us felt different. Heavy. Final. After a long silence, he admitted something that shattered what little hope I had left. He said he had been thinking about separation. The words hit me harder than anything Margaret had said. Everything suddenly made sense. The distance between us. The silence. The lack of support. As I sat there listening, I realized a painful truth. The marriage I had spent years trying to save was already over. I was simply the last person to accept it. The weeks after that conversation felt cold and distant. Ethan and I lived in the same house, but it felt like we were strangers. Our conversations became short and formal. The connection we once had was gone. Then one afternoon, Ethan asked to meet with me in the living room. When I walked in, there was a folder sitting on the table. I already knew what it was before he opened it. Divorce papers. My heart sank, but I was not surprised. Ethan explained that he believed ending the marriage was the best decision. He spoke calmly, almost as if he were discussing a business agreement instead of our life together. I listened quietly. There was no point arguing anymore. The choice had already been made. A few days later, word spread through his family. Margaret could barely hide her excitement. For years she had wanted me gone, and now she was finally getting what she wanted. Instead of showing sadness about the end of a marriage, she treated it like a victory. Vanessa acted the same way. Neither of them even pretended to care about what I was going through. As lawyers handled the paperwork, nobody asked for details about my finances. The Carters had always assumed they knew everything about me. They believed I was leaving the marriage with very little. I never corrected them. I never mentioned my family's assets. I never explained my personal investments. I simply signed the documents placed in front of me. The less they knew, the better. Around that same time, Sophia became an even bigger part of Ethan's life. She was suddenly everywhere. Family dinners, weekend outings, holiday planning. It happened so quickly that it almost felt like everyone had been preparing for it long before the divorce became official. Margaret openly welcomed Sophia into the family circle. She introduced her to relatives, included her in important conversations, and treated her exactly the way she had always wanted to treat a daughter-in-law. The message was impossible to miss. As far as they were concerned, I had already been replaced. The family seemed proud of themselves. They acted as though they had solved a problem. Whenever they looked at me, I could see satisfaction in their eyes. They believed they had won. What surprised them most was my reaction. I did not fight. I did not scream. I did not beg Ethan to stay. I did not argue with Margaret or confront Sophia. Instead, I packed my belongings and prepared to leave. On my final day in the house, I took one last look around the rooms where I had spent years trying to build a future. Then I picked up my bags and walked out the door. Not a single member of the Carter family tried to stop me. And I left without telling them a single thing about who I really was. Several months passed after the divorce. I focused on rebuilding my life and stayed away from the Carter family. I did not call them, visit them, or ask about what was happening in their lives. Meanwhile, things were not going well for Ethan's company. At first, the problem seemed small. A planned investment was delayed without warning. Then another investor decided not to move forward with a project. Soon after that, a major business agreement that Ethan had been counting on suddenly disappeared. The company began losing opportunities that everyone had expected to succeed. Employees started asking questions. Managers grew concerned. Nobody understood why everything was changing so quickly. Ethan spent long hours trying to find answers. He reviewed reports, met with advisors, and searched for explanations. But the problems kept growing. Each week seemed to bring another setback. Margaret, of course, had her own opinion. She blamed bad luck. She told everyone that businesses go through difficult periods and that things would improve soon. Whenever someone expressed concern, she brushed it aside. According to her, the family had simply run into an unfortunate streak of events. But Ethan was not convinced. The numbers told a different story. Something important had changed behind the scenes. Eventually, he ordered a complete review of several business partnerships and financial agreements connected to the company. That investigation led to a surprising discovery. Over the years, many of the company's biggest investments had not come directly from individual investors. Instead, they had been connected to a private holding company. The company had quietly supported major projects, provided financial backing, and helped create stability during difficult periods. The Carter family had always assumed that support came from routine business relationships. Nobody had paid much attention to where it actually originated. Now they were forced to look closer. When Ethan requested detailed ownership information, he expected to find a group of investors or a large corporate board. What he found left him speechless. The holding company had a single owner. One person, Claire Bennett. My name was listed on every ownership document. Every record pointed back to me. Ethan could hardly believe it. For years, while his family criticized me and treated me like I was unimportant, I had quietly been helping protect the business. Whenever challenges appeared, financial support had been available. When projects needed backing, resources were there. I had never spoken about it because I never wanted recognition. I believed supporting my husband's success was part of supporting our marriage. The revelation hit Ethan hard. For the first time, he started seeing how much he never knew about me. And for the first time, the Carter family began realizing that the woman they had worked so hard to push out of their lives was far more important than they had ever imagined. The discovery about the holding company was only the beginning. After learning that I was the owner, Ethan became determined to understand how much he truly did not know about me. For years, he had accepted the version of me that everyone else believed. He never asked many questions about my family history or the businesses connected to my name. Now he started digging deeper. The more information he uncovered, the more shocked he became. He learned that after my grandfather passed away, I inherited a large business empire that had been built over several decades. It was far bigger than anyone in the Carter family had imagined. The holding company was only one piece of it. There were commercial properties in several cities. There were investment firms managing millions of dollars in assets. There were business partnerships connected to industries across the country. Most of the companies operated quietly without drawing public attention. That was exactly how my grandfather had preferred it. As Ethan reviewed documents and reports, he realized the true scale of what had been hidden from him. Soon the information reached the rest of the family. The reaction was immediate. Vanessa was stunned. Several relatives refused to believe the reports at first. Everyone kept asking the same question. How could Claire possibly own so much? The answer was simple. I had never told them because they had never cared enough to ask. The biggest shock came a few days later. During another financial review, Ethan discovered records connected to the Carter family mansion. The property where Margaret lived had always been treated like a family asset. Everyone assumed it fully belonged to the Carters. But the land beneath the mansion was actually owned by one of my companies. The arrangement had existed for years through legal agreements established long before anyone thought to question it. When Margaret heard the news, she immediately rejected it. She claimed there had to be some mistake. She insisted the documents were wrong. She argued with anyone willing to listen. But facts were facts. The paperwork was clear. There was no misunderstanding. Then things became even more serious. Law firms began contacting the family regarding various lease agreements, business obligations, and contracts connected to properties and investments. The letters were professional and legal. Nothing threatening. Nothing emotional. Just official notices regarding agreements that needed attention. Those letters created panic. For the first time, the family understood how deeply connected their lives were to businesses they had never bothered to investigate. Piece by piece, the truth came out. Assets they thought were secure. Partnerships they assumed would always exist. Properties they believed belonged to them. Many of them were connected in some way to companies under my control. The realization spread through the family like a shockwave. Everything they thought belonged to them was not as secure as they had believed. And the woman they had dismissed for years suddenly became the most important person they could no longer reach. After the truth became known, many people expected me to fight back. Some thought I would publicly expose the Carter family. Others expected angry phone calls, lawsuits, or dramatic confrontations. I did none of those things. I never insulted Margaret. I never threatened Ethan. I never argued with Sophia. Instead, I simply stepped back and allowed business agreements to follow their normal terms. For years, certain arrangements had remained in place because I chose to keep them that way. They existed out of loyalty and trust. After the divorce, those reasons no longer existed. As contracts reached their expiration dates, they were not renewed. Special business privileges that had once been available quietly came to an end. Financial support that had helped maintain stability was no longer extended. Everything happened legally and professionally. No rules were broken. No special actions were taken against anyone. I simply stopped protecting people who had chosen to remove me from their lives. The effects appeared gradually. Ethan's company found it harder to secure funding for new projects. Potential partners became more cautious. Expansion plans were delayed. Several opportunities that once seemed guaranteed disappeared. The business was still operating, but the confidence that had supported it for years was fading. Ethan spent most of his time trying to keep things together. Every solution seemed temporary. Every improvement was followed by another setback. Meanwhile, Sophia started noticing that reality was very different from what she had expected. She had entered the Carter family believing she was joining a powerful and wealthy future. Now she was watching that future become uncertain. The financial strength everyone had always assumed would be there no longer looked secure. The excitement she once showed began disappearing. Tension started growing inside the family. Relatives who had once stood together suddenly began blaming each other. Vanessa blamed Ethan for poor decisions. Some relatives blamed Margaret for creating unnecessary conflict. Others argued about business matters they barely understood. Family gatherings became uncomfortable. Instead of celebrating together, people spent their time defending themselves. The unity Margaret had worked so hard to control was falling apart, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She had spent years believing she could decide who belonged in the family and who did not. Now she was forced to watch the consequences of those choices unfold. The future she carefully planned was collapsing right in front of her. The woman she wanted gone was no longer there to support the foundation she had taken for granted. I never needed revenge. I never needed to raise my voice. The truth had already done more than enough. By simply walking away and focusing on my own life, I left everyone to face the results of their own decisions. And those results were far more powerful than anything I could have said. About a year after our divorce, Ethan contacted me and asked if we could meet. At first, I was unsure whether I should agree. So much had happened, and I had worked hard to move forward with my life. After thinking about it, I accepted. We met at a quiet restaurant one afternoon. When Ethan arrived, he looked different. He seemed older and more tired than I remembered. For a few moments, neither of us said much. Then he finally spoke. He apologized. Not for one specific moment, but for everything. He admitted that he had failed me when I needed him most. He said he should have defended me years earlier. He should have stopped the disrespect before it became normal. He should have protected our marriage instead of avoiding difficult conversations. For the first time, I heard complete honesty in his voice. When he finished speaking, I sat quietly for a moment before answering. I told him something simple. I never wanted revenge. I never wanted anyone to suffer. All I ever wanted was respect. I wanted to be treated like a wife, not an outsider. I wanted my husband to stand beside me when people treated me unfairly. None of that had happened. Ethan lowered his head because he knew it was true. Not long after that meeting, another change took place. Sophia left. Once she realized that the future she expected was no longer there, she quietly moved on with her own life. The relationship that had caused so much damage eventually came to an end. Margaret's influence within the family also faded. Relatives who once followed her opinions without question no longer viewed her the same way. Many blamed her for creating divisions that never needed to exist. The control she once enjoyed slowly disappeared. As for me, life continued moving forward. I focused on my businesses and the projects that mattered to me. New opportunities appeared. New partnerships formed. With each passing year, I became stronger, more confident, and more independent. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Looking back, I learned something important. True power is not about showing people how much money you have or how important you are. True power is knowing your worth even when others fail to see it. The people who betrayed me believed they had won when I walked away. In reality, they only revealed who they truly were. Their choices exposed their character far more than any words ever could. Ethan was left with regret and the consequences of the decisions he made. I was left with something far better. A new beginning. And as I moved forward into the future, I no longer carried anger with me. I carried strength. The kind of strength that comes from surviving betrayal, learning your value, and refusing to let anyone take it away from you again.